Hi guys, it's Vernon again with another upload to First Generation Transform, the channel that is dedicated to helping first generation candidate attorneys with tools, understandings, and approaches that you can use in your transition and also smoother integration into the corporate world. Just a heads up before I start, you'll probably notice that most of what I'm going to be doing and talking about and what I'm going to be sharing will be with regards to or more relevant for CAs going into corporate practice, going into practice into a law firm. This might not necessarily, or rather, this is not as relevant to when you are in legal aid, going to be a CA in legal aid, because the dynamics are a bit different. So sorry for that. But I also do want to say, if it is that you are going to be in a firm one day, it probably would make sense for you to obviously sensitize yourself to this type of information now. So I just wanted to give you a heads up with regards to that. With regards to today's topic, I just wanted to say it's much more relevant for students, for university students. So, i.e., if you have not yet made a transition. For you who are already in practice, you know this. So, part one of this topic will not be as relevant for you, but part two of this topic would definitely be something that you might want to look at. Obviously, there's nothing stopping you from engaging in part one, so that you obviously understand where part two is coming from. So this is relevant for all of you. The distinction that I'm going to be making, that I'm going to be talking about, or the topic rather, is with regards to a distinction that I don't like making. But the reason why I make the distinction is because this distinction does have some practical implications, and hence I'm sensitizing it to you if you're not in practice yet. The distinction is this. The distinction is between two groups. The one group is with regards to a group of people who have grown up privileged, and on the other hand, a group of people who grew up not so privileged or disadvantaged, like I did. Here's the reason why I bring it up. If you are going to go into a firm where the majority of the people came from a previously advantaged background, then you might at times, not always, you might at times find yourself feeling a little bit awkward, feeling a little bit out sometimes, and also sometimes feeling that you don't belong. Now remember guys, this doesn't happen in every firm and to every person who's grown up disadvantaged. I mean, for some of you, you just kind of, things are more fluid. For others, it might not be that way, as it was for me. So please take this with a grain of salt. I'm making a huge generalization. But if you grow up, or if you are in a firm with the majority, then this might have come up, and this might come up for you. Where you feel a bit awkward, feel a bit left out sometimes, and then also feel like you don't belong. And why? Well, it's kind of obvious why, and you know why. But the reason I bring it up is because these two groups of people come from different worlds. They've got different ways that they look at the world, that they will look at things. They've got different types of experiences growing up. They've got different type of perceptions. They've got different type of lifestyles, right? And I mean, I can even remember when I was in practice, it was interesting because, there was some of this, even the CAs as well, they would talk about when they would go or when they would go on a holiday. They would talk about going to overseas, or if they would talk about getting married, they would talk about going to Mauritius to get on a honeymoon. And I was like, yo, that's cool. Um, so and I knew for myself, like, I on the one hand I thought it's cool, but on the other hand I was also like, shit, like, because I know when I go on holiday, you know I go to Houdini Spa, or just to the nearest camping site, Hendon Park maybe. So that distinction is there. So obviously, just different worlds. And I know it's a gross generalization I'm making. I know not all privileged people go overseas in their holidays, guys. So please just take this with a grain of salt as well. So the reason I bring that up, and the reason I bring up this distinction, is because what you might find sometimes, not always, but what you might find is that sometimes you would find that these two groups, or you would not have that much in common with the other group. It's a practical thing. It's got practical implications, and I know firsthand what it is and what it feels like. So, and there not being that much of a commonality, what then that also translate to as is the fact that to an extent it might be difficult to relate with each other. You know what I mean when I say that, right? It's difficult to connect because, like, it's a real thing. Because I mean, I think you guys know that birds of a feather, you know what they do, and here's another thing, because it can be quite easy to point fingers and say that another group doesn't want to engage with you. So I need to say this as well. If it feels uncomfortable for you as a disadvantaged group, or the previously disadvantaged, if it feels uncomfortable for you making that connection, making that more sincere connection on a deeper level, less superficial level, I can tell you something. And I hope this sensitizes you and gives you just a little bit more sympathy, not just for them, but for others, for the other group, but for us as well, obviously. But here's the thing. If it feels difficult for us, I can tell you, it feels difficult for them as well, because birds of a feather, and it's just much easier relating to those who look the same, and you know what my gist is. So the dynamic applies both ways. There's also another implication that this distinction brings up. Doesn't happen for everyone, so please take this with a grain of salt. But I know this happened for me quite a few times. But you might find yourself making unnecessary comparisons and judgments about yourself and your worth, as opposed, in relation to the other group, i.e., you not feeling as good enough. I know it was a real thing for me. That's only why I'm bringing it up. This doesn't apply to everyone. So if the shoe fits, then, or if it doesn't fit, you know what to do. But if it does apply to you, then please pay attention. So you might find yourself, feeling, judging yourself to an extent. Because, to be honest with you now, and I noticed this like firsthand, obviously, but like they really, a lot of them actually do speak differently, they talk differently, they've got a different way of moving, it's just like the shoulders are back more, they walk up more straight. It's kind of inspiring to see, to be honest with you. to tell you a little story, like when I was a CA, there was this one CA, and this guy was just smooth. I mean, everything about him, the way he looked, the way he moved, the way he spoke. You know those people that look like they actually own the building or own the company. That was him, 100%. James Bond had nothing on this guy. Okay, in my eyes that time. But that's how cool he was, and it just really, him being in the office. I mean, it's very noticeable, but it's not clanky, man. It's not like it's making a noise. It's more like a nice soft hum that's around. Even though he did speak a bit loudly. But what that did, and I'm actually tempted to want to actually send a shout out, but he might not appreciate me sending a shout out, or maybe he actually would, huh? So if you're watching this, big ups, man. Thanks for everything. But yeah, so I mentioned that because they really do, some of them do really have a different way of moving around and being, So what that did for me was that, in a not so good way, that's why I'm telling you about this, is what it did for me is it created the contrast. It actually created a mirror type of effect where I now reflect on myself and I'm like, shit, like I'm not like that. Like, yo, you know what I mean? Like I can't even talk like that. I can't float the way he floats. You know what I mean? I don't have that ooze, that vibe oozing off of me. I don't have that. So that affected the way I moved around the office. Clearly there's a distinction. Clearly there was a big distinction, but I could feel it for myself in terms of me and how I felt and related to, those who were moving around with a bit more suave. So that was my experience. So some of you might experience this. But now here's the question. What do you do about this? What do you do about this? I've got a suggestion. You're not going to like the suggestion at all. And I know that some of you were quite serious and quite clinical, are not going to be very impressed with the suggestion. But I'm going to make it nevertheless. Because now in retrospect, I understand just a little bit more. And I've got, my perspective has changed so much. So I'm going to make this distinction. Not the distinction, sorry. I'm going to make the suggestion. No? So tune into part 2, where I'm going to tell you what my suggestion is and what not a solution, but what an approach could be that you could take that would actually make things much more easier for you. No? So I'm looking forward to seeing you in part 2. Please subscribe and like and share this, man. What the hell? Share this and hit the notification bell so that whenever I upload new content that you get notified. No? See you in part 2. Peace out.